There's something truly disturbed in the soul of so many men in modern civilization. And it's quite unfortunate because many of them are taking to nihilism. And this has been quite covered in the so-called male loneliness epidemic that so many commentators have talked about. And really, people wouldn't expect me to talk about this on my channel because I normally cover politics and some social issues as well. But I believe if you're going to have a healthy political order, you must first have a healthy society. And if you're going to have a healthy society, you must have people in that society that recognize the truth and that also are on a pathway to human flourishing, eudaimonia, and who are not squalling, in a state of squalor and moral despair. And yet so many men are. I saw this set of TikToks on Twitter X, that really disturbed me. And that really showed me something that I had been thinking of for a while, but it kind of helped me add context to those thoughts. Watch real quick.
Be honest, who do you call when you are at your lowest? Who is that one person?
Nobody. I'm a man. No one cares.
Not a single soul. Nobody.
No one. Because I'm all alone.
I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I don't call anyone.
Nobody. I'm a guy. Nobody gives a shit.
Speaking for the guys when I say this, literally no one.
Y'all call someone?
Nobody. Just nobody. No one to talk to. So nobody.
No one. I'm a man. No one cares.
No one. Not a single fucking person.
I wouldn't call anyone. I wouldn't turn to a single person on this earth because they don't care. They will just find a way to use it against me one day.
As you see, all of those men are saying that no one cares about me because I'm a man. Basically saying that the deck is stacked against them. Basically completely resigning themselves over to despair solely because of their sex and how they believe certain social motifs go against them. Now, I read a comment by a commentator called Hannah Cox who in quoting those set of TikToks, blamed toxic masculinity for the sadness exhibited by those men. And I commented myself, that's actually a cop-out, and it's actually superficial. And it's also a representation of the source of the problems that men have been facing in society for a few decades now that has culminated into this moment that has been seen all across social media over the past 4 or 5 years. Toxic masculinity, very simply, in the current moral and intellectual context that we exist in the West as it relates to relations between the sexes, is nothing more than a convenient tool that can be used by revolutionaries and used by sex radical feminists to win up and score up over the patriarchy. We understand that in the 1960s, women were sold one of the greatest lies, I think, really to be told to women in the past 50, 60 years. There's been 2 great lies told to women in the past 60 years. Number 1, that your body, your choice overrides the fundamental and universal value of the life in the womb. That's one of the greatest and most destructive lies ever told that has legitimized an industry of legally sanctioned murder called abortion. And number 2, the idea that men and women are inherently in conflict because the patriarchy is oppressive, the personal is political, and therefore women, to maintain their dignity, must engage in conflict. It's a dangerous prospect when your human worth is based on power relationships and not based on a rational exploration of the self, a recognition of the self in the context of objective reality, and then acting on those recognitions in a manner that is cooperative with others to build a good life. When you have a society of enmity and conflict between the sexes, or anyone really, you can't have a society at all. And that's a different story, different day. And so that's the lie that's been sold to women. And this lie has impacted men in a great way. And it has made a lot of men turn to different power factions in the social conversation that are selling them different solutions for this very issue. Some men have turned to the manosphere. People like Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fit, all that entire group of loosely associated people who will, in no uncertain terms, cast women in very, very, very horrible terms, tell men that the pursuit of the conquest of sex the pursuit of materialism and the accumulation of wealth is what will give them worth, not necessarily anything that is a spiritual value or anything that is more meaningful than those temporal things, but all that will give them worth. And if they should treat women as if they are commodities to be won over in the market, and not as if they are gifts, jewels to be coveted through proper means. Some men will go even worse than the manosphere, and they'll turn over to the incel group. And they will say that women are just hopelessly lost to average men. They will always look at status. They'll always look at some unrealistic idea of appearance, and they will chase it, and they will chase it to the exclusion of average men, and therefore the only thing they can do is be involuntarily celibate and just hate women for that fact. And then some men may reject both of those visions, and they'll just turn to TikTok or other social media platforms, and they'll just get validation, mass validation, for their own despair. I find it quite interesting that this phenomenon is happening in this way, because if you consider the current intellectual and social context of our era, we're supposed to be more connected than ever in this digital age. In fact, the digital age has probably made communication, commerce, and several other things that the world needs to survive more efficient than generations previous. But the problem is, and I think fundamentally the problem at the bottom of this male loneliness problem, the problem at the bottom of a lot of those TikToks you're seeing about this issue, the problem at the bottom of it, even before you get to, radical feminism, power relationships, and other things of that sort, the problem at the bottom of all of this is the disintermediation effect on social relationships. I'll explain what I mean. So take, for example, courting. Courting is a very basic part of dating. Courting used to take place in a physical context. Now courting takes place largely, if you look at the numbers, over 70% of people, or more than that, around that number, have found their partners through online dating. Courting now takes place in a digitized space, not meet space here physically, but in a digitized space where the priorities are different than they would be in the physical space. And that has a vast impact on relationship prospects, on beauty standards, on all kind of things. But even more so, it has a vast impact on thinking about the proper status of relationships. See, when you meet someone in person, your sight, the moment you see them and talk to them, you're making an investment unknowingly. And then as you get to know that person, the amount of the investment increases, and it continues until it either expires and you stop talking to the person and you stop dating them, or it matures and you actually decide to build a life with that person. Well, on the internet, what is the basis for the investment? Well, the basis may still be there, but if you're interacting with an image or with text, the nature of the investment is going to be way different than if you're interacting with someone face to face. And that's part of the issue. Because when the nature of the investment is not one that is valued, because how can it be valued immensely if your primary focus may be on swiping left or swiping right, or engaging in the numbers algorithm-based game that is male dating? How in the world can it be as valuable as an investment than if your attention is primarily grounded in the physical space on one person? That's part of the issue. Now, some have suggested that the solution to this is to go back to community dating, where your parents or the pastor picked your partner for you. That's not the solution. In fact, I think that online dating can be fine, so long as we can find a way to keep that nature of the romantic investment alive. And the way to keep the nature of the romantic investment alive is, as I mentioned, it being informed by sound principles. The nature of online dating itself lends itself more readily to hookups or to very short, casual relationships than it does to a long-term, sustaining relationship generally, because, again, the nature of the context is that of transitory as opposed to permanence. And this really goes into a deeper phenomenon here, in my opinion, and it's the deeper phenomenon about love. In a society where one's interaction with courting and dating is disintermediated, love can't be properly understood. Because love, just like courting, is an investment, a long-term investment, in which you sow a bit of yourself into the soul of someone else. And you seek to pull out the best version of themselves, even at their worst, and actualize it into reality. That's really what love is about, in a certain sense. And so in no short order, the causes for all of this, I believe, are the disintermediation problem, us being so digitally connected and yet so distant at the same time, the conflict between the sexes stoked by political forces that seek to change the face of society, typically forces on the left. You've got the problem of a society that lacks knowledge of what love actually is. How can you, okay, guys, help me understand this. How can you seek love if the culture or the environment you are in does not have good examples of love? You can't. If the culture or the environment that you're in, I'll go even one step further, takes love for granted and doesn't even seek to define it, but just seeks to fill it, then how in the world can you have a sustained life or interaction with that concept? You can't. You have to know what it is you seek and understand it to at least have any chance at receiving it. You would never want to receive a bill without knowing how much you owe, would you? So why would you want to receive love without actually first having studied and understood what it actually means to have that pathos for someone else? Our culture today does a terrible job at that. Love is what you see on reality TV or what you see on these dating shows. That's what's modeled in front of us as love. When it's anything but. Love is a spiritual value that is deeply personal and endemic to the human experience. That is the glue of civilization on both a societal level and on a personal level. And we have to understand that. And then the fourth or fifth would be what results from a lack of understanding of love, a glorification of hookups. Because when you have hedonism, when you have all of these different impulses that are not about love, that are not about stability, driving you towards certain behaviors, you'll have a culture that glorifies behaviors that are bad because there's no standard the culture has to be able to correct those behaviors, or there is no immediate need to do so because that standard is not praised or valued. So many may ask, well, Christian, you've done a great job of explaining the causes. What are the solutions? I think, in all honesty, the solution begins with the men who feel lonely. Let me give you a little bit of a personal story. I'm 23, and one of the things that's been on my heart for a very long time has been my desire for a relationship, and really even my desire for companionship in general, platonic companionship. I have very few friends in my life. It's always been this way. I have some, but I have very few. And there are times where I go to sleep at night and I ask myself, Christian, is there something wrong with me that I barely talk to many people, even my own family, that I barely, have a lot of strong in-person connections? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? I've always been the odd one out. I've always been different. Back in high school, I was interested in talking about philosophy and politics, and some of the kids at school wanted to talk about Pokemon and anime. Nothing wrong with those things, by the way. That wasn't my thing back then. Although anime is kind of cool now, but not really into that now either. And I've always been the odd one out. But I had to learn something through a lot of hardship and trial and prayer and pain and self-loathing. I had to learn that the problem that I face, that so many other young men face, is that they are trying to seek a standard of value in someone else. They are trying to seek a standard of value outside of themselves. When someone else is your standard of value, when someone else is your standard of validity in this world, then in a sense, you are denying yourself the most important thing you can give yourself, and that is self-love. Not just this, love yourself, it'll be okay. No. Real self-love, where you invest in yourself by understanding what you have to offer the world. But when you're constantly looking at someone else and what they have, or looking at someone else and trying to please them, you have less time to focus on what you need to be the best version of you that you can be. So many young men are going through this. When I centered my center of value within myself, that's when I realized that my goals in life should be to drive myself into environments and contexts where I will meet like-minded people who value me for me and who understand what I have to offer to them. And that's why I work on this channel. That's why I do everything I do in the world, trying to talk about social issues and philosophy and politics. Because I know what my gifts are. I'm a good communicator. And I know that if I use my gifts, I can help people all around the world think clearly and think better about the world. That's my center of value. It rests inside my heart. And that has helped abate the loneliness problem. But it's also given some merit to loneliness as well because, guys, sometimes you need to be alone. Sometimes you need to be alone to be able to work on yourself and work on what you need to be the best person ever. And then that will lead you, inevitably, towards context where you may not be lonely anymore. You may actually value that solitude that you get, but you will have understood that loneliness had a purpose to it. That's the best advice I can offer any of you. No, it won't go away with getting cars or BMWs or listening to Andrew Tate or listening to Tommy Sotomayor or any of these people in the manosphere. No, that won't help you. That'll make things worse. That'll give you unrealistic expectations. That'll make you a menace to society. Don't do that. But if you work on yourself by first understanding yourself, what's that old philosophic maxim? Know thyself. And you cultivate your center of value in the society you live in, then that helps mediate things. That leads to personal happiness and satisfaction. And that's the pathway forward. My friends, love you all so much. Like, subscribe, share, and stay pensive. Bye, everyone.